And it's 10 o'clock, so let's get this show started. So welcome everyone to our little webinar on securing Microsoft Edge. We'll be talking about focusing totally on the Edge management service and what we can do to improve end user experience and security posture as well. We'll go through some short introduction, discuss the Edge management service, how we manage extensions in a more modern way, security baselines, what's important, and migration to Edge management service, and much more during the way as well. My name is Jörgen Nilsson. I work at Onevinn as a consultant, and I'm really happy to present for you today. You will have all my contact information in the end if you have any questions afterwards. So let's get this started. So let's do like that. So I'm not on screen anymore. That's much better for everyone, I guess. So why this little webinar on Edge? Well, because I think very often that Edge is somewhat not appreciated enough and not prioritized enough. Because if we look at where we are and where we're going, and when I prepared for this, I was actually quite interesting statistics that the number of SaaS applications used per organization has actually increased. But last year there was actually a trend that it actually decreased because many companies got their eyes on this now. Where's our information? How do we secure the information? Copilot, AI, how can you access and use our information? So we actually saw a consolidation of SaaS apps instead last year. But with SaaS apps becoming more and more important, CRM, finance, and everyone moving to the web, browser security and browser management is more important than ever because that's where we do our main work nowadays. So how are your browsers secured? How do we manage bring your own device access to web apps? How are they secured? Extensions, how can we secure them? And how secure are they, the ones we're actually allowed to be used? So what we need to start with is that we need to actually get anything done with Edge. We actually need to have a browser strategy. So I actually borrowed a quote from a customer, which is pretty recent, where we had a discussion on a service desk ticket where a web page, I think it was their system, they do the salary payment, and that didn't work in Edge for the latest release of Edge because there was a bug in Edge. And then we got the ticket that we need to solve this ASAP, otherwise there will be no salaries paid. And then when we looked at the service desk ticket, it was already updated by the customer who actually filed the ticket that, oh, this is not urgent anymore. I downloaded Firefox and it worked. And the root cause was actually an expired certificate on the SaaS application's web page. And that raises for me a lot of concern. So is it okay to download Firefox and just bypass every security features? And how smart and good is it and secure to actually do a salary payment on a web page with a non-trusted certificate anymore? So that's why this is really important that we actually take care of Edge, so Edge works in a good way. We'll come back to how we would have solved this with Edge by doing a rollback in the end, because that's also very important that we actually have the possibility to do a rollback as well, if we have those challenges as well. So what are we going to talk about now? Well, we're going to talk about the Edge management service, which is starting to be one of my favorite new things to play with and to actually implement, because this is the modern way of doing it. And this is actually based on Project Chromium. So if you want to manage Google Chrome, you basically can just sign up for a free account and a free license to actually do exactly the same for Google Chrome and get basically the same experience. But that's not what we're focusing on now. And that wouldn't solve the problem with the Edge not working either, because if Edge doesn't work, the likeliness that Chrome has the same bug is really, really high. So that's probably not a good option, but we'll come back to that as well. So what do we get with the Edge management service? Well, this is actually spreading out everywhere. You manage many of the Teams updates in Team Portal. You manage Office in config.office.com. We manage Edge in admin.microsoft.com. There's a new role, Microsoft Edge Administrator. You need to have that role. And if you have Intune permissions as well, you actually get a single pane of glass where you actually see both Edge management, cloud policies, and Intune policies. So we actually can have it there. I will come back to how they're applied, but basically they're either applied when Edge starts or when you log into Edge, depending on how you targeted it. But look, we have priority. How cool is that if we look at Intune policies? So we can actually prioritize which policy is most important and how they should be applied as well. We also get really close to 0-day support for new settings. For everyone following the security baseline work they do, they often say that, oh, this is the new setting you should enforce. But the Intune team, they don't get that information before Edge is released. So they are working as fast as they can, but there will be a delay before they are in the settings catalog. Here, as it's the same team that managed the Edge management service, we almost get it, almost get 0-day. 0 days, probably a bold statement, but yeah, very, very fast at least. So this is actually, for me, this is really cool. Before we go into demo and look at it, we need to talk targeting. So this goes for Chrome as well. So basically everything works the same in Chrome. So what we can do is either we decide to target the user, and then it's actually setting is per tab in Edge. So if you log on in Edge with different users and you allow that, you will have different settings in different tabs. I will show that as well. But if we want to enforce it on the device, we need to use an enrollment token. So we can actually copy the profile ID and add that to a group policy. Intune policy, of course, or group policy if you want to do that. So we can actually just add that token in there as a policy. And then when Edge starts, Edge will pull the policy from that token from the Edge management service when Edge starts automatically. So we can manage it from the cloud. Even if it's not managed by group policy, we can actually just fill that in the registry. It will actually pull it as well. So that's really cool as well. But we need to decide how we do this as well. So let's start here. In Edge, we have settings. We have Microsoft Edge in the admin portal. And then we have some really nice ones. We can sync purview policies. We can read documentation, basically, in this case. And then we can also look at configuration. We have a monitoring dashboard where we can actually see how many devices recommended to update. That doesn't look good. We have requested extensions. So the end users, in my policy, actually allow the end users to request an extension. So you actually can, so we're not blocking them anymore. And I think that's a much, much better idea as well. And there's a whole extension discussion is very nice in this solution instead. We also get the nice dashboard on which devices are up to date and why they're not up to date and how many. So that's a nice overview. To get that information, we need to deploy the policy for actually allowing that. So we can actually deploy a policy saying that we should enable this telemetry information, so monitor information, so we get that in the portal. This is what we get when we access two services from one UI. So up here I have all my Intune policies with Edge settings in. that come from Edge. So here we can see I have my Windows 365. I have an old baseline. I have PAW configuration for Edge. I've imported Open Intune baseline to see what they've added. And then in the end, we can actually see with the actual priority, we can actually see the ones that I've created in the cloud as well. So this is nothing new. It's been around for a long time, as you can see in my policy. That was almost 2 years ago. But I think this feature is used way too little because we need to provide our users with a more friendly, more modern experience. So we deployed a monitoring policy. This policy is auto-created from the monitoring page to delete this to actually implement the monitoring. So Edge is actually sending the version information and all that information to our tenants, so we know that. So basically, we just force this, and it will actually force the diagnostic state on the device. So that's the first thing we do. Then it takes a while for this to populate. Some are fast, some are slower. And then we go down and actually look at our policy itself. So if we go down to I call it configure extensions, probably not the best naming convention, but this is where we do our whole policy. And we do all the settings. So in theory, we could have like one of these per department, if we like, one of these per users, one of these per device group. So here we can mix settings. You can see I have a URL block list. I will come back to that as well. I have an extension setting, which looks really horrible here, but it's actually really easy to use. And then we can see how many extensions I actually approved and where it's deployed. So this is actually quite simple. If we look at managed extension, we can see that I'm allowing one password manager, so we can actually see which extensions are allowed as well, which is nice. And we have some additional customization settings as well that we'll go through as well. But let's go back here. Yeah, all right. Yeah, we can do that as well. So if we go back here, it's not the fastest portal, as I said. It downloads from information from two different backends. But if I go in here, which actually is where we do the device targeting. So I can select this one, and then I have a new button saying deploy. And then we get our new little link to deploy, or token to deploy. And then we say, okay, which one do we want to deploy? And it was the monitoring one. And then we can select that one and say that I want to deploy that. So this is how we do it and how we actually can do it, right? So then we'll just say deploy, and we get that profile ID copied, so we can paste that in our policy, basically. So that's really, really, really useful as well for us. But let's go back. So then we've created our policy. We looked at how we actually target it, and we can monitor it. That I said, how many devices need updates, recommended extensions, requested extensions, and we can enable version monitoring as well. So let's talk about extensions then. Why are extensions bad? Well, basically an extension should be, from a information perspective, be categorized the same as any application at all, because you will actually grant an extension permission to consume your information in different ways. So if we look at this one, this is from one of the most popular ad blockers there are. And again, we're back to this whole discussion. So this blocker will actually have read and change access to all your data on all your websites you visit, right? So if I have this enabled, I open my salary information from Onevinn. Then there's my personal information, everything, and I don't know if that's consumed by the ad blocker. We have no written agreement with them. We don't have any GDPR agreement with them how they should treat our personal information. So then it's out there somewhere. Maybe, we don't know. That's the whole discussion with extensions, right? And we have this problem as well. This is actually one of the latest ones. This happens all the time. So July 9th, this was again, Researchers discovered a campaign that tracked users' online behavior using 18 different extensions in the official stores. The number of installs was over 2 million users, right? And again, the extension got good, offered good functionality, got great reviews, probably paid ads as well, so it actually got really high in the searches in the store. And then you install something malicious, right? So this is why we need to do the whole extension stuff, but you know that already because that's been talked about so many times. So what can we do if we use this management service instead of forcing settings using group policies and Intune? Well, we can actually request extensions instead. So instead of just blocking them, we can actually let our end users type a justification why they need it, which is a much better experience. So if we go back here and we look at let's start a new tab and take that discussion as well. So if I go here, I'm logged on with one of my test accounts, which is Jorgen. And when I look at policy, this is the policies that are applied. Here we can see what kind of policy it is. So if it comes from the cloud, it's cloud. If it comes from platform, it's from group policy or Intune. If it's cloud security, it's the diagnostic data settings. And here we can see a mix of settings coming from platform, cloud. We'll come back to who wins and all that stuff afterwards. But that's how we actually see it, right? But if I just open a new tab here and take my other user, Jane, instead, and then we do the same challenge and we do policy, we can see that I'm missing a lot of the cloud settings because I'm a different user, right? So it's still basically, well, not a new tab, but you spin up a new version of the browser. So we can actually have different settings for different users on the same machine depending on who is signing in Edge. So we can actually have maybe a looser policy for your normal account, but if we allow maybe admin accounts to do something, say that we have tier 1 or something, allowed to do that from your own machine. As soon as you sign in, we can force the sign in, and as soon as you sign in, you will get the more restrictive settings on that user. So it actually gives us new options to manage it per user, but it could also be that we don't want this. And as you can see here, I have the latest policy timestamp as well. So it will actually only change that when there is a new setting as well. So if there's no new setting, it will wait for 24 hours before it checks for a new setting if we don't exit and restart Edge. So it depends on how you manage it, how fast the settings are out there as well. But this is really cool. So we can have different scopes and different levels of security depending on which user we are, right? So in theory, I could allow, if we look here, so Jane can actually on the same machine, I can install extensions because it's allowed. There will be no discussion. She can just install them. But if I go to my other user, which is here, and I want to have a new extension, let's do this, and then we'll take extensions, and we'll go for, let's do an ad blocker just because we talked about it before. We'll say get, and then you will be prompted with this instead. Do we want to send a request to administrator so that you're allowed to do this? This extension, by the way, requires these permissions as well. So then we can say need to block ads. Then we'll send that in, right? And then basically, not immediately was maybe a strong word, but if I go down to my extension policy again, as I said, it's reading from more than one backend. It's not that fast. And then I go to managed extensions. We can actually see requests. So here it is already. So you can see that I requested it now. So it is really fast. And then we can say that I want to approve this. I want to do whatever you want to do with it as well. So that's actually also nice. What we also can do is we can also have a digesting of this sent to me as well. So you can say that, okay, because I'm not going to go in here and look what's being requested every day. So what I can do instead is say that, okay, once a day, send me an email with all the new requests that are there. So I can actually request them as well. So I actually get the notification as well. And I think this is a much better way of managing this than just blocking the user, without a doubt. So it's a much better user experience, and we are still in control. And as you saw before, instead of having the whole list of app IDs in the policy, we can actually see in clear text which are actually allowed. And it's actually very easy to allow them as well. So we can say that we want to allow an add-on, and now I can actually browse for it instead. So we can actually do this in a much better way than we do with Intune or group policies, where we just paste that ID instead of the app. So it's a much more modern feel, and that's very important for me at least. So then we can get our extensions out there. We can control them in a different way as well. We can base them on permissions. So what we're afraid of, or what we want to protect us against, is information being changed or being stolen from us or consumed by AI or whatever it is. So what we can do is actually say that, okay, let's allow all extensions based on permissions instead. So if the extension doesn't require the permission to read and change all your information, for example, then we can allow the end user to automatically install it. So we can also do that in a more relaxed way, and saying, okay, let's allow them to do more without involving us, right? So we can actually do this as well. So if we go down and say that we want to edit the settings, we have extensions, then we can, based on here, we can actually set them based on the permissions instead, right? And that's really cool as well. So we can say here, okay, block every extension that requires a specific permission, right? Or breaks a permission. So we can actually do this in a less admin heavy way, but still get a good result as well. So that could be one option for us as well. And again, what we're after is providing a more secure, but still a more modern experience for our end users. So let's go on. What can we more do that we can do in Intune, but it's kind of harder? So we have a landing zone with enterprise secure AI. We have organization branding. We have profile switching. We have security settings, and we have secure password deployment. So what we can do here is actually quite interesting. So if we go to enterprise secure IA, we can actually configure how ChatGPT should work in the browser or the chat. And then we can also say, okay, what do we do with other AI features? So Microsoft is updating a list. So basically it's a URL ban list that's being deployed. When you check that button and say enable, Microsoft will create this policy for you automatically. And then when there's a red sign on it, they have actually updated a list, but you haven't deployed the updated list. So again, if we go back to the configure extensions, and is this a good way of blocking AI? No, probably not. But it's one way of doing it, or other AI engines to consume your information. So if we go to customization settings, we actually can control, as I said, so how do we want the Copilot icon in the toolbar? Yes or no? Copilot in Edge, how should that be doing? Should I allow to generate text and editing? And then we can say, okay, users can access third-party chatbots, and this is here, and then I say, okay, block all. Then it will update the policy with the latest ones that Microsoft added to that list as well. So then that warning is gone. And what it does in the end is actually just creating that this list and extending this list again for block list for different AI engines. So that's one way of doing it. We can do this as a start and then edit that and add our own and whatever we want to do, right? But it's still a start. We can also change Microsoft Editor spell check. We can control more of how our information is consumed in Edge, right? But again, what if I use different browsers? Microsoft actually tried to help us here as well. So we actually, under security settings, we have another one called block other browsers. So Microsoft actually tries to help us. So it actually creates an app locker policy in Intune when you actually check this in the Edge management service. And by default, when you create it, it will try to target all users as well. But you can change that to a group, of course. But again, it's at least, even if we don't want to use it, it's a good way of looking at that maybe we should use something like this to enforce our, as we said before, browser strategy. So if we secure our browser, Edge, then you shouldn't be able to run Firefox or Brave or Tor browser or whatever it is from your user profile, because that's what we're talking about. So if we go in here, we can say, okay, enforce secure browser access. And then it actually creates this policy, this app locker policy for us. So if we go into app locker, and this is why we go through this as well, you should know that that's what it's doing, because it could mess with other app locker policies or whatever you have in place as well in your environment. So, and it's not called that, it's called the block, right? So it's called block third-party browsing Edge management service. And then we actually get the policy created, and we can see that it creates two app locker policies, and it creates one for store apps and one for the binaries itself. So here we can actually say that it blocks Opera, it blocks Google Chrome, it blocks Firefox, it blocks another Opera, Brave, and so on. So Microsoft will maintain this and then again give you that little red triangle saying that, now you need to update the policy because we added more browsers or a certificate changed or something like that. But again, even if we don't want to use it, it's still a good discussion point to have, that we need to enforce our browser strategy, and this is one way of doing it. And then we can build on this, create our own, and decide what to do. And of course, edit it if we want to do Firefox, but then I really recommend that you manage Firefox as well. So we don't close the front door and open the back door in the house wide open instead, because that makes no sense. So that's what we get for that. And this is what it actually blocks then, right? So it actually, yeah, you can see which browsers it blocks right now at least. So let's talk about the security baselines. So security in Edge, basically that's been fairly stable for a long time. You can see I try to follow this, and I really urge all of you to do this as well. Because if we are responsible for Edge, Microsoft actually reviews the security settings for us to help us on what to implement and what to do. So we can actually monitor these. So we actually unsubscribe to them, and then we can see that, okay, so when version 142 is released, Microsoft security team has reviewed all the new settings and came up with the decision that there's no new security setting that they recommend to enforce. Maybe you want to enforce them, so what they also do is this, which is very useful as well. So Microsoft Edge 142 introduced 5 new computers, settings, and user settings. And then there's a small spreadsheet with the actual differences, so you actually have a chance of doing this. So I actually really recommend that you follow this, because Edge is our most important app, so it should be managed in a good way. If they deprecate setting or remove settings, they will write that there as well, so we know that we can remove them. So this is the new settings we got in 142. So if you're responsible for Edge, you should go through this and look, okay, is this something we want to implement in our environment to increase our security posture? And then continue on that work every time they release a new version of Edge, right? Because that's what we want to do. There are other baselines as well, but again, baselines are only a starting point. You should use them as a baseline and then build your own additions to it, because there's always things more to do than that's in here in these settings and recommendations. So if we go back again to Edge and security, so what happens if our CRM system no longer works in the latest release of Edge? It will take Microsoft acknowledges and say, well, your support ticket, we know we'll fix this in 3 days. So we have two options, and this is something that all Edge admins should try as well, and that's rolling back Edge to an older version. So basically the options we have is deploying a secondary browser, Firefox maybe, as Chrome probably have the same issue, or we should go back and look at how we actually roll back Edge, and we should try that as well. So we have tried it when we want to, when we have that need, right? So build that into your, add a little note in your account. We want to try rolling back Edge on a couple of test machines, so we know how the end user experience is, and we know what to do if it's actually necessary, right? It's recommended that we sync our settings, because if we downgrade, say that we use Password Manager and they change something in Password Manager and we downgrade Edge, in theory we could lose our passwords in Password Manager if they are not synced. Syncing Password Manager, that's a different discussion, but yes, absolutely. And then we can, so basically this is what we need to do. We need to flip the settings for how updates are installed, and we need to set the target version, and we need to set the policy saying you should roll back to that target version as well. So if you haven't tried out rolling back in Edge, I really urge that you try it out. So you actually know what's happening, you should how you should communicate to the end users and how the end user experiences. And then one day we can release these settings again when Microsoft fixed the feature, and then update the browsers again. But this is something that we need to have in every toolbox. If we use group policies, we can do the same thing as long as we use the Edge update service. If we deploy Edge and update it through Configuration Manager, there's an MSI downgrade you can use to deploy and actually achieve the same thing. But so this is something we really want to try out and do, so we know what's happening and so we can fix any potential problem. And we do that with rollback, right? So going back to the Edge management service, when a user signs into Edge on a device for the first time, that's when the sync occurs. Then it checks for changes every 90 minutes. If there's no change, then it will say, okay, fine, now I checked so many times, so I will wait 24 hours. If there's an error in a policy, then it will check every time the user opens Edge to see if that error is resolved, right? That's also something to take into account, because if we still deploy an Edge policy which we haven't cleaned up with expired, or it will move from deprecated to unknown settings. All those unknown settings that are not valid anymore, that was deprecated and removed, they will cause an error. So they will cause Intune or Edge to actually check for policy every time the end user start Edge. So that's probably unnecessary as well. So that's also some of the housekeeping we need to do with Edge, right? And if Edge isn't running for the next policy check, then it will check when you opens Edge again. Today, Edge is basically open in the background on all our machines, so that will probably not be an issue at all. So that's also important. What we also need to take into account is the whole user signing into Edge. Because if we want to enforce anything on the end user side, we need to force the sign in, and we need to remove the possibility to create new profiles, we need to remove the possibility to use an in-private browser. And this is also a discussion we have a lot with customers, but I'm working at IT, I need more profiles. Yeah, you do, but probably your end users doing their daily work, they don't have that need. So then we should sign them in automatically. And that automatic sign-in will flow through Copilot chat as well, and that whole discussion as well. So as soon as we lift that policy, we'll get other challenges as well. So we need to force the users to sign in, and we should look at removing creating policies, browse as guest, all those settings as well. Most of that stuff is still in the security baseline. So the security baseline is a really, really, really good place to start in this whole journey of modernizing Edge. So let's look at what happens when we migrate to this, because I assume that everyone isn't using this, but are using either group policies or Intune. So if we look at how we do this, this is actually a screenshot from the device. So it will actually tell you on the device, because Intune compiles all the policies in the back end of Intune. So it only is one JSON file you're pulling down on the device and applying. Edge management service, as we have the priority, they will do the same as group policies. So they will actually download all the policies, and then they will look at the priority for that one, and then it will look at these two settings, who should win. And by default, platform security wins over user security, which gives us interesting scenarios if you look at managing a user signing in on a tab on a machine managed in a different tenant, because the tenant settings the computer settings will win over the user settings. So there's a lot of ifs and buts depending on what you're logging in from as well. But I hope I have a conflict here in my little machine as well. So if we look at my policies here, we can see it here instead. We actually see here, warning, conflict. If we click down, it will actually tell us what we saw before. This value is set to false. There's more than one source trying to configure this value, and the conflict is that cloud is trying to set it to true. So that's actually how we can see these errors on devices. And that's something I urge you as well as admins. You can do it now while you're in this meeting. Just open Edge, write Edge policy, and looking down all the way in the bottom. Do I have policies that are still being applied, but are not being enforced anymore because they are deprecated or removed? That's also always a good thing to test, right? So that's how we actually see the conflicts. And from that conflict, we can then set the two policies saying, okay, so when we migrate to this, we can deploy exactly the same policy from Intune or from Edge Management Service as Intune or group policies. Then we can actually look at the machine. Okay, so basically is everything conflicting now, and Intune is winning, and there's no gap, there's no misses. Then we can flip this policy, allow user to win. Then we can review it again and make sure that the cloud management service wins, and then we can remove the Intune policy if we want to do that migration, right? We can also control this, that user policy overrides the machine policy. We can also set that the management policy overrides group policy or Intune. So that's how we actually move that part away, right? So that's actually what we want to do there. So wrapping this up, so what are our lessons learned? Well, it's always hard to find an owner of Edge. It's always like the desktop team owning Edge. Someone needs to drive Edge security and follow that up with every version of Edge releases. And again, move to a more modern experience around extensions, and it's a much better user experience to actually write the request that I needed instead of just getting in the face that extensions are blocked. So that gives us a more interesting way. Require the user to force sign in, and also remove the options to create more profiles, guest, everything, but that can bypass your security settings and harden forensics and whatever, right? That's the old excuse for it, at least. The downside with request extensions is that we have no information about who requested an extension, so we can't go back to them and say, okay, now it's approved. That's something which would be really nice, right, as well. And I hope the whole enterprise AI with the app locker policy that will give you an example on how you can use app locker to enforce your browser strategy. And everyone needs a browser strategy today in the world of AI and extensions and threats, and Edge and browsers are our primary application, basically. So I hope you got some insights in how we can make our browser and Edge both more secure, more modern experience for the end user, and also new possibilities with actually enforcing the browser strategy, which I hope everyone is doing, and also maybe restrict with a simple URL block which AI engines you're allowed to visit. At least before we have some other rail guards in place for our information, right? And with that, I thank you for listening, and we'll stop the recording and post that. And now that I've said that, we can go on with any questions there are, but it looks like it's pretty question-free. So if you have any questions, you can just either reach me afterwards or just type in the Q&A. So I hope you got some at least inspiration on how to modernize your Edge management and increasing security posture by enforcing a browser strategy in probably the easiest way, at least to get started, right? So if there's any question, just feel free to type them. Otherwise, I thank you so very much for listening to us, or to me, for these 42 minutes. And I hope you have a great rest of the day and a great weekend.